Greetings, friends. My name is Peter, and this is Retro Unscripted. This is part 3, and the last part in episode 18, which talks about baseball games in my retro library. I'm glad that you took the opportunity to join me for this episode and hopefully for the last 2 parts as well. There's certainly a lot of things that I've covered, and I really do appreciate you guys watching. So, we've talked about the NES, we've talked about the Super Nintendo, so let's talk about the Genesis a little bit. My first experience with the Genesis was in 1993, and it wasn't baseball that sold me on the system. In fact, it was Joe Montana's NFL Sports Talk Football 93 that sold me on it, and it was because of the ability to do play-by-play, which at that time was just unheard of. You kind of had to supply your own play-by-play if you were playing a game, and I did that probably a little bit more than I should have, but still having it done for you and hearing the announcer calling play-by-play was something that was pretty unique at the time. But my first baseball game for the Genesis, and one that I enjoy very much, is Sports Talk Baseball, which is this guy right here. And I really should show you that right there because there's nothing on the top. Sports Talk Baseball, of course, was the same kind of thing. There were play-by-play, so how many outs were there? Was it a strike? Was it a ball? Does the runner score? These are all things that the play-by-play announcer would cover. The game itself was kind of basic, and I do have some struggles every now and again as far as pitching goes. But more often than not, I like just coming back to this game because it takes me back to when sports talk was such a huge deal. In other games later on, and this was really the forerunner to other games putting commentary in, and this was years earlier. So I find that fascinating, and it's one of the nostalgic things that keeps me coming back to sports talk baseball. Now, of course, World Series Baseball, which is this guy right here, maintained the sports talk theme, but had graphics that were much more detailed, had much more detailed gameplay modes, and there was a home run derby, full seasons with actual baseball teams rather than just the players, and that was certainly notable. Now in 1995, the next World Series game, they got rid of sports talk. And they stuck with just some on and off commentary here and there, but still looks great, still plays great, and the World Series baseball games are certainly fantastic for the system and overall. Just a lot of fun to play and certainly impressive, not just for the time, but I think they still hold up today. That's pretty neat. The next baseball game is, actually I'll talk about the one that's on my screen on the GX behind me. That is Tommy Lasorda Baseball. Tommy Lasorda Baseball, I have an affinity for because it's one of the first baseball games for the system. And it's certainly pretty detailed. I like the over-the-field view, kind of looking top-down, almost at the top of the dome, if you will. There's some decent detail in the players. Certainly some decent detail in the field as well. And the game just plays pretty darn well. It is early, so there isn't any battery backup. There are passwords that you need in order to play the game. But if you're just looking for a pick-up-and-play game for baseball, you certainly could do worse than this. I think it holds up pretty well, although I think nostalgia bolsters it a little bit more than anything else. Next up, we're going to go back to Tecmo. Now, Tecmo, of course, we know them for Tecmo Bowl, Tecmo Super Bowl. They also came out with basketball, hockey, and basketball, hockey, and baseball games. There we go. This is the baseball game, and this I have the Genesis version. The Super Nintendo version I don't have, and I'll get into the differences here in a second. Tecmo Super Baseball does what the Tecmo Super games did. Very statistics-driven. Simplified but not overly simplified versions of the games that they represent. And there are some interesting cutscenes here and there. The big difference between the Genesis version of Tecmo Super Baseball and the Super Nintendo version is that the Super Nintendo version does some interesting camera work in the field when the ball is hit. It seemed to be a trend for the Super Nintendo because of Mode 7 technology. But for the Genesis, that doesn't happen. It defaults to a more traditional view, which I think is better. And in my opinion, this is actually the better version of the game if you have to get one between the two platforms. So keep your eye open for this. This actually is really quite good. Finally, we come to the R.B.I. baseball games, and there were several. My favorite of the R.B.I. baseball games is the port of R.B.I. Baseball 3 for the Genesis, which looks like this. This plays like an R.B.I. game would or should. The music is similar. The players are a little bit more detailed, but they still look a little... It's very transitional, as you'd expect with a cross-generation game. But still, if you're looking for that tried-and-true R.B.I. baseball feel, that's where this game comes in. And that's why I enjoy this game very much. Unfortunately, that was the last of these. Because with R.B.I. Baseball 4, things changed quite a bit. And I talked a little bit about this in my overview of Super R.B.I. Baseball for the Super Nintendo. The camera angle gets lowered. When the ball is hit, the camera angle just never feels right for fielding, so fielding is a big problem. Hitting just never feels comfortable. And while I like some of the things that R.B.I. Baseball 4 does in terms of situationals and home run derby and such, to me it's just not enough to make up for what it loses from departing from the traditional formula. Then there were two other R.B.I. Baseball games. This is R.B.I. Baseball 93. There was also one for 94. And those games are basically roster updates with the same kind of thing, with the same kind of play that R.B.I. Baseball 4 has. The only notable difference really is that R.B.I. 93 has Jack Buck, who is Joe Buck's dad, the good one, not Joe Buck, who's terrible. Jack Buck doing some play-by-play and other commentary, which was kind of neat. Interestingly enough, and I didn't mention it when I talked about Relief Pitcher, Jack Buck also does some commentary for that on the Super Nintendo as well. So there you go. I totally forgot to say that. I'm not going to edit it in, so there you have it. So that's all of them. Those are all of the baseball games for my 8-bit and 16-bit systems. I have some for 32-bit systems as well, but I think I'm going to hold off on those because I've covered more than enough. So what else to expect now that episode 18 is in the can here? First of all, I would hope after all this time it's no secret that baseball video games and I are pretty tight. I am disappointed with how simulation-oriented baseball games have become and how much we've gotten away from accessibility and ease of play. While there are some games that kind of sort of overcome that, like Sony's MLB The Show series for the PS2, which I think struck a good balance between simulation and accessibility. They got progressively more difficult and more complex once it hit the PS3, and that was disappointing. And on the other end of the spectrum, 2K Sports Major League Baseball games, Major League Baseball 2K games, had a certain ebb and flow to them. After 2K10, they started to really get pretty terrible. And for modern baseball games, aside from Little League World Series 2010, which I talked about in the first part of this episode, it's a struggle if you like arcade baseball games. Now, I hold out some hope. R.B.I. Baseball 14 is coming. I don't know a lot about it. Nobody knows a lot about it because the company has kept all of its assets close to the vest. But based on what once was, who knows? If they go back to what worked, maybe we'll see something pretty neat. If they go back to what didn't work or try and do something different entirely, then who knows? But I got my fingers crossed. much like I do for the Red Sox again this season, that there'll be a good outcome. I hope you enjoyed this extra long 3-part episode of Retro Unscripted as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you. The next episode of Retro Unscripted will go up next week, as we will do episodes 19 and 20. So we'll actually be up to episode 20. One other note I want to make before I get out of here, and that is thank you very much to my subscribers. I, at last check anyway, topped the 100 subscriber mark, which in just 2 months is a pretty big deal to me, and I could not have done it without you guys. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of the content creators who inspire me and really help to spread the word about my little project here. Without you guys, I wouldn't be where I am now. So that's it. No video log this week. This is all about baseball week. You can expect to see a Pete Plays episode, or maybe 2, before week's end. And don't forget to check out retrounscripted.wordpress.com later on this week for my top 10 baseball video games list. I hope that you'll check it out. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you on the next episode of Retro Unscripted. Take care.